Welcome to foHRsight, a podcast about making work better. I'm one of your co-hosts, Naomi Titleman, and I'm joined today by our next special guest, Dr. Tracy Brower. Tracy may be familiar to some of you as she was a guest on our show way back on our 91st episode. The topic of loneliness and connection and community has been really close to our hearts here at Future Forward. And so, with the upcoming release of her new book, Critical Connections, we thought what perfect timing to invite Tracy back to our show. Tracy is VP of Workplace Insights at Steelcase. She is also the author of two prior books, The Secret to Happiness at Work and Bring Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work. She's also a PhD sociologist studying community, work-life fulfillment, happiness, and the future of work. Welcome back to our show, Tracy. How are you and where are you joining us from today?
Thank you for the greet. I'm so glad to be here. I enjoyed our last conversation so much. I'm actually joining you from snowy Michigan. We are in the middle of a blizzard. I know it'll all be over by the time this airs, but wow, are we in the middle of it at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we may be having another blizzard by the time this airs because 'tis the season in both of our locations. And we just caught up that you, Tracy, took a very treacherous car ride from my location here in Toronto back to your location in snowy Michigan, which I can only imagine was very frightening.
It was, but I made it. I was so thankful. And we are hardy Northerners, I think.
Yes, for sure. We cannot avoid the snow at this time of year. So we will embrace it as much as we can. So we like to check in before we get started. And so my check-in question for you today is, what do you do, Tracy, to build and nurture critical connections?
I really love this question. I work really hard to really remember what's happening for people and then check in with them. Like I have a good friend whose very close niece is getting married, or a good friend who just had surgery. And so I really, really like to kind of check in and say, hey, excited for you about this, or thinking about you for that. Or even if I had a friend recently who changed jobs. And so I just checked in with her to say, hey, just thinking about you. Hope it's going well. Not a big check in to say, anything's required from them, but just I like to stay in touch and like to kind of be present.
That's a great habit to build. I could do a bit better on it, but I also try to check in with people, remember, certain milestones, and, even sneakily sneak it into my diary once in a while to make sure that I remember. But those are great little practices to build more deep connections with people. So I love that one, and can be practiced both in professional and in a personal context.
Yeah, exactly. It just builds that sense of proximity and presence and kind of that you're attending to somebody else.
For our listeners who may not have listened to our first episode together or may have forgotten, tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today and what made you focus your research on loneliness.
Yeah, I've always been so curious about people and connections and organizational dynamics as well. So my PhD is in the sociology of work, how we affect our work, how it affects us. And I was really kind of listening to the narrative of work that, it's a grind and less is more and it's just a terrible thing. And so I got curious about how do we create the conditions for happiness at work. And in that research, it became so clear that connections were really, really degrading and people were struggling and suffering. And we know that loneliness is just at an epidemic level today. So I thought, and then I saw some great research about how work is such a place where we connect with other people at lots of different levels, but that feeling of being seen is so important. So that was a really important part of my interest. So I've worked in training and development and HR over many, many years, and then been adjacent to HR over the years, and now get the opportunity to work with customers and clients and potential customers. And that insight that we bring to our experience at work and our experience in life is what really got me curious, not only about loneliness, but about connection, community, how we create friendships.
That's great. I mean, I know you and I talked last time about kind of that 50% stat of 50% of people lack a sense of belonging at work, which is, mind-blowing. And so as HR leaders, thinking about our organizations, what are the warning signs that workplaces are experiencing this disconnection, and why should we care beyond employee satisfaction scores?
Yeah. Well, connection and feeling like we're seen and like we matter to others are huge drivers of performance. So, of course, we want to do the right thing for people. But if we're looking for signs or signals or reasons that this is a business issue, performance is really high on the list. If we feel disconnected from other people, we don't feel the same level of obligation or responsibility. And I mean obligation in the best sense of that word. Like we want to be needed. We want to feel like our brain matters in the room. We want to feel that sense of positive obligation. So one of the signals that people may start feeling disconnected is maybe performance is suffering. Another signal can be if people aren't taking as much initiative. You know how sometimes you'll see like there's an opportunity on a team and people are like, oh, I'll do that, or I'll help with that. Or people raise their hands for the next job opportunity or the next adjacent role, for example. If we see less of that kind of behavior, that is a signal that people are feeling disconnected. Another one that's actually one that might be surprising is sometimes we see people providing less recognition to each other. Because if we're feeling disconnected, we feel just a little bit more insular and we may not be noticing others as much and therefore recognizing them as much, or we may not feel as much of a firm foundation ourselves and therefore feel as generous about recognition. And the last thing, it's not the last thing there is, but the last thing I'll mention. Sometimes you see less behavior around helping, asking for help, offering help. Those can really be signals of some disconnection, which have huge implications both for people and organizations.
Yeah, those are great ones. In our research, in our trends report in 2025, and I assume it will come up again in our 2026 research, we're just doing it right now, is loneliness is one of the biggest human impacts that are coming about as a result of the macro trends that we're experiencing around us in the world. And there's such a deep connection through loneliness kind of connects also to two of the other human impacts we identified, which is disengagement and this tiredness of driving for productivity. They all kind of interrelate, don't they?
They do. They do. If we feel disconnected from our work, from each other, we're just not as committed. We're not as engaged, right? Like part of the reason that we feel engaged is because we feel that sense of community. We feel the continuity among each other. And I know we'll talk a little bit later about the idea of social contagion. There's a beautiful concept that's related to that called collective effervescence. It's from sociologist Emil Durkheim, who's a classic sociologist who used to talk about, this energy that we get from each other. And that drives things like engagement. That drives things like performance. So love that that's part of your trend report as well. Such an important topic.
Yeah, collective effervescence. I wrote that down. That is such a beautiful concept. So we will go there in just a moment. But you and I also talked about this trend that we're prioritizing convenience over connection a lot of the time in our modern reality. And when you and I first connected, we were much closer to, most people were still connecting online most of the time. Now we've gone into more, I think, of a hybrid rhythm. People are now starting to prioritize, I'm seeing in our community at least, connecting in person. But we also talked about the funny example that, I would rather, go on my Starbucks app and order something than go and talk to a barista and, have that conversation with them. So and I imagine this trend is even further exacerbated by the explosion of AI. So tell me a little bit about this trend, how the shift is manifesting in the workplace and what HR professionals can do to address it.
Oh my gosh, Naomi, this keeps me up at night. It really does. And AI is such a both and. There's tons of value, tons of efficiency, tons of better quality that we can accomplish when we're using AI really effectively. So all good in terms of AI. We don't want to take a Luddite approach to this. There is also research that the more we rely on AI, the more it changes our thinking, and we even have lower levels of neuroconductivity and connectivity in some of the MRI research that's been done. Another thing that will happen in the work environment potentially is more reliance on AI and less reliance on teammates as we're working together. That has huge impacts for how connected we feel. We might be super efficient about getting our work done, but we're not feeling as fulfilled or rewarded by that. There was a great study that was done with P&G, and it's well documented, so it's public, a very, very large sample size across multiple departments. And they looked at people who worked with only AI, people who worked only with teammates on a project, and people who worked with both. And the best results and the least damaging results in terms of relationships and fulfillment and purpose and commitment were with the both and. When we incorporate AI, but when AI doesn't replace our team relationships, our team work together. Here's the other thing that I think we have to be eyes wide open about, and that is the risk that we interact with AI instead of real people. So I was talking to this principal of a design firm founder, and he said, oh my gosh, I'm using AI all the time. I talk to my AI on my way to work in the morning, and I talk on my commute on the way home, and I get so much coaching and I can think out loud. But he said, what I have to be really careful about is that I'm still having those conversations with people in my firm because I need to mentor others. I need to connect with others. And if I'm only talking to my AI assistant, I am losing that opportunity to not only build relationships, but lead and model the way in his experience. And he said, I've got to be really careful to keep talking to my family as well, because if I'm all talked out by the time I get home, we need to maintain our personal relationships in the same way. So I think those are the things we need to be really attuned to in the work environment and in our roles as HR professionals.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, even when we just had Google, instead of asking someone, do you know like blah, 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 we would go to Google, right? Now it's that times a million, right? Like you don't even ask people about like the recommendations for TV shows anymore, right? You go into your AI, you say, I really liked this show, recommend me 10 more. And that's, to your point, that's the way we connect with others. That's the way we can form and deepen relationships when we're those, seemingly trivial topics. That's how we build real connection.
Yeah. Something else I think about on that topic, and I love your example. I literally just the other day used AI to say, hey, I liked these books. Which others would you, because I needed more. Oh my gosh, you're right on. But I think the other thing is that in some cases, we start to lose common experience. Mm-hmm. Like some of us are old enough to remember watching TV and having a few major networks and the shows that we would all watch on Thursday night. And then, oh my gosh, we'd be talking about that show on Friday morning, right? Mm-hmm. But now with more use of AI, we don't necessarily have all those same experiences. We're not talking about GR movie recommendations or our book recommendations or the show that we all just watched. We might lose kind of that sense of common language and common experience. So those are definitely things that we need to be careful of and intentional about making sure we maintain connections.
Yeah. And again, kind of that balance between efficiency and connection and really kind of keeping and building and maintaining those habits that do both, that both enable efficiency where we can and also build connections.
So well said.
So I got a sneak peek into your latest book and would love to dive into a couple of the concepts if that works for you, a little bit of a sneak peek for our listeners. In chapter 3, you explore research on the power of physical presence. And so you and I talked about hybrid and remote working last time. Now it's kind of the standard. We're, moving into a business as usual on that front. How should leaders think about proximity and connection differently? I mean, it's not about being together all the time, is it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and hybrid is here to stay. We see lots of studies that prove it accelerated and it's going to be here to stay.
Yeah.
So that's reality. I think what we need to think about in terms of proximity is really, really recognizing it has incredible power. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The implications of that are that we also need to be really intentional about when we are in physical proximity, what kind of work we're trying to accomplish. What are the benefits, not only for the organization, faster decision-making, customer focus, but what are the benefits for human beings, like making friends and connections and feeling more fulfilled and getting growth and development opportunities. So I think we need to be intentional about what choices we make for when we're going to be in physical proximity. So that's one. Mm-hmm. There is tons of data on the benefits of flexibility. flexibility, actually. Like when we give people autonomy, when we give people flexibility, that pays back in terms of commitment and fulfillment. And that's really great when we can do that, when that's possible with jobs. In addition, there's some data about talent. When we sit within 25 feet of a top performer, our performance increases 15%. When we sit within 65 feet of other people, there is a measurable knowledge spillover. There is a measurable spillover when you're sitting by people who are super engaged or in proximity to people who are super engaged. There is a measurable spillover of performance when we're in proximity to people who are performing and, really kind of delivering on results. And so there's very clear evidence that proximity matters. There's very clear evidence that flexibility is also important. I think that the other thing that we can just be attuned to is kind of the idea of perceived proximity. There is also some data that when we perceive that people are closer, we're more likely to follow up, follow through, and complete tasks. This was experimental work that was done when people thought they were sitting across a corporate campus, across the nation, or across the globe. And our perception of proximity mattered because they were all sitting next to each other. That was the trick in the study. So I think we have an opportunity to intentionally create the sense of proximity, giving people the opportunity to get to know each other, making sure that we understand how our tasks influence other people's ability to create results, making sure, again, that we're intentional about where we're working based on what we're trying to accomplish.
I think that's great. And I think, the deliberate choices is so important, right? It's not enough to just show up in an office and all be on Zoom meetings together, which is what we've been saying since 2020, I feel. You really have to know what your goals are, being in proximity to one another and leaning into that.
Yeah, your word deliberate is exactly, I just think that wraps it so brilliantly.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go on to social contagion. Collective effervescence is related here. So you discuss social capital and social contagion in Chapter 4. Can you explain how these dynamics operate within organizations and how HR leaders can intentionally design for positive social contagion rather than letting things happen by chance or negative social contagion?
Yeah, well, and there is negative social contagion. There's a little quote I love. The worst behavior we will tolerate is one of the primary drivers of culture. So
Yes.
We want to make sure that we're managing that. But social contagion has everything to do with that picking up energy from each other, that spillover effect. Social capital is the relationships that we build that help us kind of find our way around, help us get things done. It's the ability to kind of know how things need to come together and how this particular system, this particular culture works. And so one of the things we can do to be planful and intentional about building the opportunities for positive social contagion, one is giving people the opportunity to get to know each other socially. When we feel personally connected to people, we tend to also follow up and follow through more effectively because we feel that kind of face to face, like we feel like there's a person on the other side of that work transaction. And we understand how our deliverable matters to that person. So when we help people connect socially, that actually really works well. Another thing is that when we can cross tasks and make sure there's that opportunity, we tend to think that bonding happens best through social, but it actually happens best through task. When we have to roll up our sleeves, when we have shared goals, when we have problems we're trying to solve together. Not that we're looking for problems, but when we have things that we're trying to do together at kind of a meaningful level. So that means pulling teams together cross-functionally, giving people opportunities to contribute in teams or projects outside of their swim lane, giving groups the opportunity to kind of get to know each other through work that we need to do that might be more complex that pulls us together. So when we can be intentional about how we assign, how we design projects, that makes a huge difference. And the other thing I think that's wonderful to consider is there's a really great concept of dirt roads versus superhighways in terms of how we think about social capital and social connections. So dirt roads are like, if I know I'm in one department and you're in another department and we see each other for coffee now and then, we're walking a dirt road that's not heavily trafficked. It's just a little footpath, right? All good. We need to keep doing that. That's great. A superhighway is a concept where lots of people on my team know lots of people on your team. We're all connecting frequently in different ways over different time periods with different kinds of subgroups. Superhighways tend to link us in the organization more effectively, and they tend to bring on this idea of social contagion because we just have more relationships throughout the network. So that's another thing that we can do as HR professionals is just think about how do we bring teams and departments together on cross-functional work? How do we bring them together in even social activities? How do we bring them together through potentially volunteer opportunities in the community? All of those kinds of things can help build that opportunity for social contagion.
I love that, dirt roads versus superhighways. And it seems like we've lost some of that since the pandemic, right? Like we come back together, we go to the office, we do the bare minimum, we go home. We don't do happy hours anymore. We don't do volleyball games anymore. We kind of just go do our work and come home. So it's really important to build these social opportunities into organizations so that we can connect and do our work more effectively and more efficiently together.
Yeah, we have I talk about this in the book, but I talk about cognitive biases, generally speaking. One of our cognitive biases is toward familiarity. The more familiar we are, the more accepting we tend to be. It works with food, it works with music, it works with art, and it works with people. Like the more we know each other, we played volleyball together. We went out for, appetizers together, whatever. When we know more about people, we can be more accepting because we understand kind of what's behind their behavior, or we know them a little bit better to understand what might be their motives or intentions, which is something that we tend to make assumptions about. So to your point, that opportunity to get to know each other at more of a personal level can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. So let's follow that thread and talk about friendships at work. There's been a lot of articles about how friendships, are the key to longevity and the key to health in your older age and all that good stuff. And also a key to being more engaged at work, I assume. So let's talk about friendships at work. And what does research say about the real risks versus rewards of fostering genuine relationships, genuine friendships at work?
Yeah, this is a good one. I did an article a while ago on friendship at work, and it went crazy on LinkedIn in the comments because some of the people said, oh my gosh, I make my best friends at work. Other people said, absolutely not. There has to be a boundary. And after all the comments, there was finally somebody in the end who said, I just want an environment that's friendly, which I thought was a very good kind of cherry on top, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is pros and cons, and this has everything to do with where we're at personally and what our preferences are personally. So there is lots of research that 75% of us make our friends at work, and at work is the number 2 place that we make our lasting friendships. Number 1 tends to be college and university. So work is an important place that many people make friends. It can be a source of friendship. And we want to be careful that we get to choose. Like, I shouldn't be forced into deep friendships with others. I need to maintain my boundaries in the way that are most important to me. I think the thing we want to think about is, what do great relationships at work look like? Whether you call them friendships that are more superficial or more deep, maybe you call them connections. But I think we're looking for building relationships with people that we can count on, people who are there for us. I think we're looking to build relationships with people that we can share a challenge with, like, oh my gosh, I've got to figure this out, or oh, I'm working on this thing right now. Do you have advice for me, right? We want to be able to share some of those challenges. Not deep, dark things necessarily, but really opportunities to ask for help. I think that's the other thing, is we want relationships where we can offer help and where we can ask for help. Reciprocity is really important for kind of social success across an organization. So we want relationships where we have give and take. And I think the other thing we're looking for are great relationships with a sense of continuity. Friendships at work or great relationships at work give us just a reminder of kind of who we are and how we fit and how we matter. And that can look like continuity over months or years as we work together over time. So I think whether you call it friendship or whether you define it as just good connections, I think the crux is we want those feelings of responsibility and connection and community within the work setting as well as outside of the work setting.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it also gives you something to look forward to as you go to the office, right? I'm looking forward to seeing so-and-so and catching up on the weekend and hearing about their kids. It won't happen for everyone, but if you have one or two people that you feel that connection to, it can just make the work experience a lot more pleasant.
You're so right. Absolutely. I have so many friends at work. I've got about an hour commute each way. And I'm so glad to go. And I run into the people that I'm really, really glad to see. And I catch up with them. And yeah, it can be so energizing.
Yeah. So we're going to go into I love metaphors, and you have some great ones in your book. So can you share a bit about your canoe metaphor and how it relates to mutual empathy and collaboration, specifically that are needed to solve problems together rather than staying isolated?
Yeah, for sure. There's it's like an old saying that says it's like, four people in a canoe going down a river, and one side of the canoe has a hole in it. And, two of the people look over at the other side and they go, boy, I'm sure glad the hole is in their end of the canoe.
Right.
Right?
Dot.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think sometimes we can have this funny idea that if somebody else is going through something, it's not also our problem, right? And there are things, we can't own everything. The toxic empathy is where I feel every single, negative thing or hard thing that somebody else is going through, which saps my ability to be supportive. A more constructive form of empathy is where I can see and attend to somebody, ask questions, be present, provide a listening ear without taking it on myself. And I think the key from a connection, from a community standpoint, is understanding that they is us. How we always talk, well, they do that, or they do that, or they, but they is really us. And there's a wonderful, there's a term called Ubuntu, which is kind of this idea that I am because we are. A person is a person through other people, which sounds very, I don't know, I think it sounds magical and elegant. But it also means that we kind of get a sense of identity from our work, from each other. We get a sense of identity from understanding how we fit, from how others are relying on us. We get a greater sense of mental health and well-being when we feel seen. And so there really is an important understanding of mutuality. It's not just your problem over there in the organization. There's ownership that we all need to share, and we will actually feel more fulfilled when we feel that common sense of ownership.
Beautiful. Love it. Let's talk about the practical implementation of some of the things that you talk about in your book. You focus on concrete systems, rituals, and structures that high-performing organizations put into place to facilitate connection. So what should HR leaders start doing tomorrow to build a connection infrastructure?
Yeah, that language of a connection infrastructure works so well. It's got to be part of a culture. And so I think when we have, first of all, we've got to have tons of mutual respect. So we need lots of accountability for our behaviors and how we respect others, and really, really clear values. So shoring up those values, shoring up those performance management and feedback systems is really smart. We probably assume that most of those are in really good shape. Otherwise, we wouldn't be so interested in this topic. Another thing that we can do, I think, is clarify and provide opportunities for people to have shared tasks across projects and departments. We talked about this, but the more opportunities there are for people to have that mutual sense of goals and mutual sense of project outcomes and work together, bringing their unique capabilities, that's huge in terms of building the social relationships across the organization. Another thing that I think we can do tomorrow is really set up affinity groups, empower affinity groups, encourage affinity groups. The more we have an opportunity to connect with people for lots of different reasons, like we've got a book group and we've got a motorcycle enthusiast group, and we've got that group that, I don't know, they go out and do wine tasting or non-alcoholic wine tasting, right? When we have different interests that bring us together in different groups, that makes a huge difference. Another thing that I think we can do that's so simple is when we onboard people, I have a buddy system. that just helps you connect in the organization. And it's very cool if that buddy's outside of your own department, then you're starting to build those more than dirt paths, superhighways. And I think if we tomorrow can set up mentorship systems, that's also really, really smart, right? People that I can mentor, people who might be mentored by me. Those are all really great ways to create all of those connections across the organization in a very pragmatic way.
Great ideas. And let's talk about how HR can do that for ourselves. We love to talk about putting on our own oxygen mask before taking care of others. So what advice would you give to HR leaders who are trying to find more critical connections for themselves?
I think HR is in a unique, challenging situation, right? Because HR is often in a position to not be able to let their own hair down, right? Because of the confidences they hold and the anonymity of the work that they do a lot of times. So I think that one of the things we need to do as HR professionals is to find that really, really close, tight circle of people that we can trust. It's a couple of people in the organization that we can really let our hair down. That's one. Two, I think we can be really intentional about creating relationships outside of the organization, because sometimes we just need to talk something through, and we literally cannot do that because of our roles inside the organization. I think another thing we can do to really build those connections is ask questions of each other, really stay vigilant about how each other are doing. Offering help is extraordinarily linked with well-being and happiness. We think about how do we get help? How do we get less lonely? How do we get friends? But giving is a really important ingredient in that process. And then I think another thing is that the more we can be transparent, like I think a lot of times HR professionals our modus operandi needs to be Teflon, right? Like we can't always demonstrate what we're thinking. We can't always share very, very openly with lots and lots of people. But I think when we can be transparent, when that's really appropriate and okay, that is a huge relief for us, right? Because sometimes we just need to think out loud. Sometimes we just need to have that safe haven, safe harbor relationship where we can do that. So those are some ways that I think we can be really specific about getting our own support.
Great. And quick plug for foHRsight Plus. Please do look into joining us in foHRsight Plus if any of this sounds like it resonates for you and you want to find your community of future thinking HR leaders. Okay, Tracy, before we close out with a feel good, we are getting to the end of our time together, unfortunately. How can listeners get in touch with you and learn more about the great work you're doing?
They can look me up on tracybrower.com. There's lots of information there on my new book coming out, Critical Connections. It's available wherever books are sold. But also there's just other information about learning resources that are available. I'm on LinkedIn, Tracy Brower, PhD. Would love to connect there. So people can look me up. And of course, all the usual social media channels, TikTok and Instagram and you name it. I'm on social media and pretty easy to find. So I'd love for the listeners to look me up.
Amazing. And I'm just going to throw it out there. We are happy to give out some copies of your new book. So listeners, if you post about this episode and tag me, Naomi Titleman, and or Future Forward, you will be eligible to win one copy of Tracy's new book. So we would love to spread it out there and get critical communications going.
Aw, thank you. That means so much to me. So cool. Super exciting.
All right. Well, we are going to end with a feel good. Tracy, what are you feeling good about today?
Oh my gosh. I am actually really excited about this book launch and talking about this topic, which I know sounds really vanilla and it's probably the wrong answer. I also, at a personal level, and it's the right answer because I'm super excited about it. I'm feeling really good about it, but I know it's
not vanilla
down
at
the
all.
Center answer.
No.
At a personal level, our daughter is pregnant. And so
congratulations.
Really, really looking forward to exciting days ahead and new expanded family. So
oh my goodness. Is this your first grandchild?
Yes. We're
so exciting.
We're so excited about it.
Oh, congratulations. That is a great feel good and great note to end on today. Tracy, thank you so much for being an awesome guest, an awesome repeat guest on our show. And until next time, everyone, take care.